A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away.
Welcome to Panel Up, your monthly pop culture panel. I'm John Campbell.
And I am Mike Gargoni.
Oh, Gargoni, it's an overstuffed month.
There's too much. I'm so full, John. It's so full of content.
I say this as we try to figure out what to do next month, and I'm like, I don't know if anything times out. We'll see. June one. I hope so. We'll see. I don't know. Unless I can.
There's too much stuff in like July, and there's like this weird thin sliver in June that's like awkward.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening. I was looking at shows that are like, yeah, but they don't end until July.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some stuff. I mean, there's plenty of movies coming out. I don't think I can get you to talk about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, but
you could, but it's mostly just me going, okay.
Then Ethan Hunt hangs off a plane.
How about this, John? I'll record like 5 clean reactions, and then you talk for 2 hours and insert those where you will. Here we go. I'll go with, If you say so, this man's going to die on a film set. I guess he's fine. All in all, I think it's okay. So there's your 5 clean takes. Insert those where you will, John.
He hangs off a biplane. It's the most dangerous thing he's ever done.
This man's going to die on a film set.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. He didn't even say that. I just hit a button and he said that. That's how yeah.
We've got the Mike Gargoni listens to John talk about Mission Impossible soundboard.
All the missions have led to this. All right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about some things I think you might know about, which is we're talking... Boy, the main things we talk about on this show are Marvel and Star Wars, and this month you get both, folks.
A double-fisted helping.
I don't like the use of double fisting, but...
Double-fisted, not double-fisting.
All right, it's a hop, skip, and a jump, sir.
Get your mind out of the gutter, John.
Yes, we're talking... We've got 2 big things here that have collided in May. To fill us with joy, though. I mean, really. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches for us, really.
Honestly, like we're back on the swinging pendulum of Marvel and Star Wars are dead. Marvel and Star Wars are the best they've ever been. Marvel and Star Wars are dead, and we're on the counter swing at the moment.
It has become the thing about every release of these things is really. That, I would say, is the similarity between these franchises, is the constant eulogies for both of them, and then the, like, man, someone saved it.
We're so back, baby. Because, like, just as Andor's wrapping up and being hailed as, like, the greatest Star Wars ever to Star Wars, and Thunderbolts being in theaters being like, my God, Marvel has never been better.
CU is back, baby! Full cylinders!
We get a release of an Ironheart trailer that is making the internet be all sorts of racist.
Hot take? I think it looks super fun.
I think look, you put the Hood in anything, I will watch it, because that is a level of villain that I did not expect from the MCU, and I am here for it.
And you get a truly amazing actor to play him, so, it's great. And also... I mean, we already like Dominique Thorne as Riri, but I don't know what Alden Ehrenreich is doing there, but I'll take it.
Hey, if he wants to Ehrenreich all over the place, that's all right with me.
That dude is charming. That's all I know.
That's because he's the second place Han Solo in your heart.
Oh, always, yeah. But I will say, I walked out of that movie going like, well, there's your next big movie star, and he works, but I think it surprises me he hasn't become a bigger deal.
Yeah, well... All we're waiting for, I mean, with a lot of these stars, and like I think we're going to talk about this a little bit with Florence Pugh, honestly, is like they just got to wait for that one thing that like pops with everybody, and suddenly they're all over the place.
Well, Florence Pugh, which will lead us into Thunderbolts, because Florence Pugh, I think, is somebody who, and oftentimes, and I'm not saying this, note that I recognize how potentially elitist or snobby what I'm about to say sounds, but a lot of people like Florence Pugh. If you're really into movies, like I am and stuff like that, you'll end up seeing her in like a bunch of small stuff or like British films or TV and be like, wow, she's great. And so then now when people are saying that, like with Thunderbolts out, there's a part of me that's going like, well, yeah. She was always good. What are you talking about? Like, to me,
Right.
she's been a big old movie star for like 5-6 years now. But people talk about her in this way where it's like, hey, do you know who's great? I'm like, yeah, Florence Pugh. She's awesome.
I mean, honestly, weirdly enough, I think it is Black Widow that, like, popped her with a lot of people.
Yes.
Because she was the standout from that movie.
Well, I feel like she is the model of what has really worked for the MCU, which is just what a great actor meet character, right? Like, just that is such a... She took... It's not even about the comic book character, because Yelena in the comics isn't exactly like this,
No.
per se. But it's just about what that character and then what she brings to it from her acting persona, and that just collides, and it's just so charming. And then obviously they saw that because that built a little bit more in her Hawkeye appearance, where I think she really popped in that show.
Totally.
Also, and then so she basically becomes the center of this movie in a lot of ways.
Well, and before the horror movie nerds come at me, Elliot, I know you're foaming at the mouth if you're listening to this. Yes, she was great. Yes. Midsommar. Yeah. I know that movie was big, but it is like a super grisly horror movie that was a little bit more niche than the summer blockbuster Black Widow film.
No, I mean, this is definitely the Marvel stuff she's done has been her just the most exposure she's gotten.
High profile.
Yeah, just in terms of, once again, yeah. I mean, I think I think she's great in it, but she's one of 1,000 people in Dune Part 2.
Sure.
Yeah.
She's there to stand next to Christopher Walken, look a little less crazy.
Yeah. Once again, she's great. And obviously Oppenheimer, she's once again, and I think she's really good in Oppenheimer, but she's amongst a massive ensemble.
Sure.
This movie really does feel like, even though this is an ensemble piece, I mean, she is front and center on the poster. It does sort of feel like I think Thunderbolts really has two main characters, and that's her and Bob.
Yeah, 100%.
That it's really their movie,
and those are the two with the biggest emotional arcs in the film,
and the way that those arcs then intertwine with each other and sort of come to the same conclusion at the end is and we should say, as always, spoilers for both this and Andor starting now.
So let's stop calling it Thunderbolts and start calling it the New Avengers then.
Well, what we found out, of course, was the whole marketing campaign of this. People go, why is there an asterisk at the end of it? And the asterisk is that what somebody from Marvel said is the movie's still called Thunderbolts. What we've done is just explain the asterisks.
Yeah.
So it's Thunderbolts asterisk the New Avengers.
Right. Because by the end of the movie, this ragtag team of rough and tumble individuals has come together and sort of jogged sideways into becoming the world's new Avengers.
Yeah, they sort of fell into it, really, and let's be honest, it wasn't the initial plan, and I mean... Can we talk about how much look, I know everybody loves Florence Pugh. I love Florence Pugh, but I will forever love Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah.
God to me. And she has been doing these little cameos that are fun, but man, does she get to go take it to an 11 in this movie.
She is something that the MCU hasn't had in a long, long time, and that is just like a pure scumbag human bad guy.
Right, but in this way that's so realistic, in that slimy politician, like, because the whole thing with the New Avengers, right, is just like her superpower, as it were, is her ability to spin.
Mm-hmm. And manipulate, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's just like, that didn't work? Whoop, pivot to this.
Yeah. Her constant pivoting through this movie is the like dance recital of villainy that she goes through is so entertaining in Thunderbolts.
It's so good. It's exactly the kind of thing you're talking about when we haven't had it in a while. It's the kind of thing I think we really all responded to with Rockwell as Justin Hammer as well.
Yep.
These people who aren't. I mean, she is a world-threatening. She is a potential global threat on a certain level, but she's not she herself has no powers or whatever. It is just sheer selfishness
She's no Thanos, she's no High Evolutionary, she's no Gore the God Butcher. Like, these grander than life, cosmic or like supernatural science fiction entities that are going to sculpt the universe how they see fit. This is someone who is very recognizable in our current political landscape as just a wheeler, dealer, and slimeball.
And the idea that the movie starts with, Congress is trying to do something about her.
Right. The fact that there's this whole pivoting cross-section of the film where Bucky is concerned that has to do with getting a confirmation hearing for an impeachment of the director of the CIA.
And you have the Wendell Pierce character, the great Wendell Pierce, by the way, who is in 2 of this summer's biggest movies, because he also played Perry White in Superman. Congressman Gary is the character's name. But the idea that he just keeps going like, stop thinking like a superhero. It's like, you got to read the packet. It's about the thing. I've got evidence. The right testimony is going to get, he's the guy who's inside the system going, that's how we bring this woman down. All right. We just sort of follow the thing. And that's too slow and boring for one James Buchanan Barnes, freshman representative of Congress, James Buchanan Barnes.
Okay. Why make Bucky a congressman?
I think to do this,
it's right. Maybe
to tell the story about like the idea. I mean, right? It's sort of the idea about like, well, because I think coming out of Falcon and Winter Soldier, I didn't immediately think he's going to go to Congress, but it is sort of this idea of Sam became Captain America. I do think some of it is Bucky is trying to find his place.
Yeah.
So his attempt to be part of the world more is to go. I'll go into the system, but then as he's finding out, it's like, oh, the system's super boring. I mean, I love him reading the congressional packet and going, it's so boring.
Packets. Ugh.
Yeah, it's just like, this is a guy who, I mean, and by the end of this movie, I think he realizes this is a guy who needs to be on his motorcycle, shooting bombs at things.
Sure, but can you just for a moment imagine Bucky giving a stump speech somewhere that would win him votes?
No, he won on name recognition alone, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing that people always bring up too is they're like, wasn't he a brainwashed assassin? Like, how did it, like? I do think, and friend of the show Brendan Jones brought this up, and I think he's right about this. Is like, I think the blip did a lot to change how people perceive the world, and so I think post blip, a lot of stuff couldn't happen that would never have happened beforehand.
Sure. Pre-blip, there's this sense of like overriding normality to the MCU. It's like, okay, weird stuff is happening in the background, but the entire world doesn't necessarily either recognize it or consider it like the new normal. Post-blip, and we've seen this more and more in the MCU movies going forward, is just like, the weird Marvel and comic booky stuff is kind of just taken as just like, well, that shit happens if you're in New York.
I mean, it's the thing in is that it's in Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? Like, or whatever is it wizards, robots, whatever? Like, they're categorizing threats.
It's the big 3. It's wizards, androids, and aliens.
Yeah, there you go. It's like it's got to be one of those.
Well, what about Doctor Strange? He's a sorcerer. But sorcerer is just a wizard without a hat.
Yeah, I mean that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff. I'm so happy because we've always talked about this. Something I love about the Marvel comics is that people, it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, traffic's held up because Spider-Man's fighting the Lizard in Midtown. And you're like, oh, fuck, I got to get to work. And
I mean, one of my favorite comic books is Young Avengers. One of my favorite bits in Young Avengers typifies that, when it's like, Captain America shows up after everything's gone to hell with the Young Avengers. Jessica Jones just happens to be nearby because she's been tracking these kids. And, Kang has shown up, and Cap is like, oh, is this a Kang thing? And Jessica Jones is just like, oh, I hate Kang things.
It's just like it becomes and I think this movie does that too, especially by the end with them becoming the new Avengers. This idea that like these are people who go to work as superheroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so it's another day on the job, but you're just like, gay.
And the vast majority of them are broken, troubled people who are just kind of trying to find their niche in the world and sort of failing at it until they come together, because connections and building parts of like a found family is what gives these people purpose and meaning.
And what's so fun about this is that they're taking people from other things. So it's like they're not but we really know. You're like, oh yeah, that's that side guy from that thing. If you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier, you're like, oh yeah, John Walker was a shitty Captain America.
Man,
by the way,
Wyatt Russell rules in this movie.
I was just about to say the same thing. I really love his John Walker, and I love the way that they're never fully redeeming him. He's to me, John Walker is the guy who peaked in high school, and he's still trying to get by. I mean, he even has the joke about it in this movie. Yeah. Go Bears. That he was the high school quarterback, and now he's in his 30s, and he's still like, I was the high school quarterback, so everyone should listen to me. And they're like, no, you're dumb. I mean, one of the funniest jokes in the movie is in the post-credits scene where he goes, what do you mean there's this issue with space? We've got this whole building. So much room.
Outer space, idiot.
Yeah. Oh. The whole thing too, where he's like, I don't know what any of these buttons do. You're just like, this is a guy who's not listening to the orientation. Talk about a guy who's not listening to any of the debriefs.
Yeah, but he's also like, he does. I like that they highlight his military expertise. They actually like give, because that was always the concern going into this film, is like, well, and they actually even like lampshade in the movie, is everyone is just like some stripe of super soldier that shoots and punches people, except for Ghost, who has the phasing powers.
Yeah, it's like, can any of us fly? Oh, great! So we all just punch and shoot.
Yeah, but they all do bring their own levels of expertise to the team, and the fact that the movie can take some time to show that off is part of why it's successful.
Well, and I mean, there are things like when they're out in the desert, he knows what they can eat. He has seen combat, as you bring up. Like, it is a thing where it's like, he does have some level of, even though he's a selfish prick.
And again, they lampshade a little bit where it's like, he says the helicopters are flying too high, they won't be able to track them. And Yelena is just like, we get it, you were in the military.
Yeah. I mean, and like the other funniest thing is like, what about your hat? What do you mean, my helmet? Like, cool, right? She's like, I don't know. Do you think it's cool? Pretty cool. Like, this movie, I think one of the things that people have responded to about this movie, I mean, I think there's a couple things I've seen commented on. One of the things actually is the low stakes of it, that it doesn't feel as, I mean, the Sentry, or the Void, more specifically, is potentially a world threatening thing, but the movie doesn't portray it in the same way it portrays a Thanos or something like that. It always brings it back to the personal. It always keeps the stakes emotionally feeling specific to the characters. But I think the other thing is, and this is something when we talk about both of these, that I was both this and Andor, because we're sort of just talking about these. These are linked together on this episode mostly just because when they came out. But I do think the two things, or the one thing that they both share, is that they're made by people who don't come from these worlds inherently, these filmmakers. And so you have, this is directed by Jake Schreier, is the director of
Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts. And he had a big hit with the TV show Beef on Netflix.
Sure, yeah.
Which is about an escalating road rage incident that turns spectacularly insane. It's a crazy show. Check it out.
Stars Stephen Yeun and Ali Wong. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, Stephen Yeun was supposed to play the Sentry in this, as you might know. Was originally cast as the Sentry from that.
Had to drop out for like just scheduling reasons. Was that right?
Because of the strike, he's also in Mickey 17 with Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
And they would have shot separately, but it pushed. So he was committed to Mickey 17. But as he has said, by God, I will be a Marvel character. That's unfinished business for Stephen Yeun.
Everything I know about Stephen Yeun is he's a guy who's committed to being a massive dork.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is, too, it's like, well, that's great. I do want you to be a Marvel character, but you are already invincible, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That guy rules. We love a Stephen Yeun, and I think we'll get to Louis Pullman. I think Yeun would have been great. I think he would have been different, but great in his own right as the Sentry.
But Pullman does kind of knock it out of the park.
No, I mean, it's one of those, but they did talk about also that they did rework the script also, that Yeun would have been actively different, like even story-wise, than Pullman.
Makes sense.
I was
bring a different energy to the character.
Absolutely. But I was just saying, like, yeah, so this guy directed, like, a John Green adaptation. He directed episodes of Shameless. He's a character drama guy. He did direct on Skeleton Crew, so he's got a little bit of sci-fi cred there.
Sure. But like, I think that's his foot in the door with like Disney at large, right?
Well, and Skeleton Crew was made by John Watts, who brought in a lot of his fellow filmmaking and film school friends and stuff to work on that show. That show had a lot of people who weren't traditional Star Wars directors. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that people have really responded to in this is that approach, is that it really does feel character first. This is even the thread of the movie is about a guy's emotional struggle.
Right. And it's interesting to say that, given how slight the character arcs are for everyone outside of Yelena and Bob.
But they're simple, but they're really clearly defined. Like, everybody has a clearly defined arc, even if it's a small one.
What is Ghost's arc?
What is? I mean, they all potentially have the same arc, right? Which is they're all accepting.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough.
That they're part of a group. That they're stronger as a group.
Yeah. Because I will say the one who gets short shrifted the most in the team is Hannah John Kamen's Ava Star, who's back from Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah. Though I think she's really great in it, and actually, I like the movie does a lot to endear you to her.
Sure.
More, so, I mean, which I think So I mean, I think a lot of it is. I mean, she honestly, she does have the short shrift of the arc. I agree, but I think that's because a lot of her arc is in Ant-Man and the Wasp. She's actually like has maybe the biggest arc in that movie. Weirdly, she's like one of the main things in that movie. But I do think a lot of
wish that she could like have a quick conversation with Lawrence Fishburne in this film. That's all I'm saying.
He was supposed to be in it. Originally, they did want to get Lawrence Fishburne in it. This went through. I was reading an interview with the writer Eric Pearson, and this movie went through a lot of variations over the years that they were developing it. Because I don't know if you read any of this.
The original one was with Zemo and including the Abomination as well.
Well, there was that, but there was also the original plot of the movie was that John Walker was going to be the villain, and the idea was that Valentina had convinced him that his super soldier serum was wearing off, and he needed to be microdosing super soldier serum that would have eventually turned him into the Red Hulk. And then that obviously kind of got excised and moved over into the plot of Brave New World. But that was the initial threat, was the Thunderbolts going to have to come together to stop John Walker, Red Hulk.
Interesting. Which would have been a pretty radically different take on both John Walker as the character and what they do with him in this movie.
But there was that, and then there was there was a full draft of this movie with basically this plot that had Taskmaster as a main character throughout the whole movie.
Sure, yeah. And that seems like kind of a last-minute change based only on what we see in this movie and how, like, Taskmaster is sort of treated in the marketing going into this.
Yeah, people had kind of pieced together what they were doing with Taskmaster, even though it was designed. I mean, Taskmaster's on every poster. They even digitally inserted Taskmaster into clips in the trailer.
Sure, which they've done in the past. They did that with the Hulk during Infinity War.
They play fast. It's very clear. And Marvel's made it very clear that you cannot trust wholly the images in the trailers.
Right.
People know that now.
But to make her the like sacrificial lamb of this movie to kind of establish stakes is I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about it because all it really does is establish that these characters are willing to kill each other at the get-go. It doesn't which
you do need, obviously.
Yeah, but like going in, we all know that these people are trying to murder each other. Like the fact that one just offs the other one right from the start felt a little cheap to me.
I mean, I had no issue with it. I mean,
obviously Taskmaster's not a character. This version of Taskmaster, anyway, isn't a character that any of us are like super connected to. Poor Olga Kolyenko. Due to podcast time travel, I don't know how this lines up, but John and I were just talking about the Hitman movie, which she is also in.
And by that you mean we will talk about in a couple weeks the Hitman movie.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. I don't know. You are the master of the release schedules, John.
Yeah. Because we record for a peek behind the scenes. We record IP Squad like 5 to 6 weeks ahead of what you're hearing. So this is coming out right away. So that'll be in a few weeks.
Okay. So as of you listening to this, the current IP squad is up to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, maybe? But we're in the video game adaptation season. We're going to cover the Hitman. She's also in that. She's
while you're at it, make sure you go
in this.
Subscribe to those. She is in this, yeah. She was at the premiere and stuff. I mean, she definitely, and you know. But yeah, she gets one line in this.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, I don't know where exactly and why that happened, but originally they talked about there was an entire subplot that would have been that she was the one who struggled to, because of her brainwashing was so much more intense than it was for the other widows. There would have been a running thing throughout the movie where she would keep shifting to, wait, I need to kill John Walker. And they're like, no, we already dealt with it. Oh, shit. Mm-hmm. That was going to be the runner of Taskmaster in the movie, was that she would, her short-term memory was so fucked up that even when they decided to work together, she would keep forgetting and still go back to trying to kill John Walker.
Well, and I'd read that there was also some like emotional arc between her and Yelena that would, because they're both like products of the Red Room stuff. Yeah,
there would have been that stuff. And I don't know if that was excised. Once again, I don't know if that was just they felt like, that's not working, or that's dragging the pacing down or something. I don't know. Obviously, though, they ended up doing this thing, which is, you know, I mean, definitely there was a feeling, even though she's not the most important character. When I saw this on opening night, there was definitely like from the audience when she just gets shot in the head.
Sure.
You know,
it's sudden, it's abrupt, it's violent, it's meant to shock people.
Yeah, and I've heard other people go like, I was trying to remember, does Taskmaster have a healing ability? Was she going to get back up? And no.
Yeah, no, just gunshot to the head, she'd be dead.
I do not think, though, as I've seen some people say, like, good, finally, we can get real comic book Taskmaster. I don't think this is to set up, now we get the real Taskmaster. I mean, maybe they might. Maybe they might. I mean, everything in Marvel is like, if they have a story, they'll do something. But I don't think that's the plan here.
Because, like, Taskmaster is traditionally a Captain America bad guy, but he's kind of also just a catch-all bad guy that can show up wherever.
Literally on my desk right now.
Yeah, that one.
He's also just a rad design. I mean, that's sort of why I have it right here. But next to my Captain America's, though. So it's I'm not heartbroken, nor do I think I'm like, finally, good, the real Taskmaster will show up. I don't have a lot of investment in that. Yeah. But yeah, I think the thing that, as we talk about, we should mention Lewis Pullman, because he is so the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
And
he plays Robert Reynolds, a.k.a. The Sentry, a.k.a. The Void.
A.k.a. Bob. Did you see because he's in Top Gun Maverick, for those who remember Lewis Pullman, and the joke in that movie is that his call sign is Bob.
Right.
But he did go, can we make it not Bob? And they're like, well, he kind of already his name in the comics, and and it's like, shit. So this is his second Bob.
And look, he will be forever a Bob in my heart. But what I found interesting about the use of him in this film is that in the comic books, for a little bit of comic book context, we're all about context here.
Of course.
The Sentry is a character that was introduced in the early to mid 2000s as kind of a big experiment in comic book gaslighting. I don't know how else to describe how they introduced the Sentry.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was that he was presented as if he was a lost Stan Lee creation.
And he was reintroduced into the comics in a way where every character around him was acting like, oh yeah, the Sentry, he's been here the whole time. And that led to a larger mystery about how his powers warp and affect reality, and he is kind of like a walking retcon in some ways.
I think smart not to do that in the movie, because that would have overcomplicated and confused a lot of people probably.
I kind of honestly expected it, though, because it felt like it could have been a soft way of opening the door to, well, the world is way weirder than we expect, but there's some omnipotent entity that is manipulating people's perceptions.
I just think, my guess is, knowing the way that they write these movies, at some point they tried to work that in, because they're always trying. They go through a lot of drafts, which I like that people think that's a bad thing. Like, oh my god, they're on another rewrite. You're like, they're trying to make it better, you guys.
God forbid we refine ideas.
the same thing whenever you like the people just go. Just the other week, Fantastic Four was doing some reshoots. They're like, "Oh God, reshoots on Fantastic Four." It's like I think once again they've got a cut, and they're like, oftentimes this they get a cut and they go, "Oh, it'd be really nice." I mean, sometimes reshoots are as simple as it'd be really nice if we had a close up of Mr. Fantastic right here.
It would be good if we had a 1 second establishing shot of him opening the door into this next room.
Yeah, that's oftentimes what reshoots are. People think reshoots are like we're remaking the whole movie. It's like, no, we're just missing. If we could just get a shot of him turning the wheel that we can cut to and then cut back to the car or something like that. Yeah. That's what a lot of reshoots are. And that's why you can also do them like weeks out from release sometimes. Sure. But anyway, I just think that might have been a cool way to do it. But I think the other thing is like, that just too much for this movie that already has like 7 main characters?
Yeah, maybe. But I guess that's what I was expecting going in once we introduced the idea that the Sentry is here. But having it be more about, because another big part of the character of the Sentry is this yin-yang thing of the Sentry and the Void, and how they're the same person, but they don't think of themselves as that. It's a little bit dissociative identity disorder. It's a little bit like more supernatural stuff happening. It's a combination of things like a lot of these comic book characters.
It's my favorite thing about the Sentry, and it's why I love the Sentry. I love the idea of a superhero who is also his own arch nemesis. I think it's such a cool idea, and I've always just been obsessed with that. And the idea that there is a cost to using his powers. He is the Superman of Marvel, but if he acts like that, then there comes a darkness. There is a cost, and the end of this movie is very much about that.
And yes, comic book nerds, I know Hyperion is technically the Superman of the Marvel comics, but
the argument about who is the Superman of Marvel is an ongoing. Who's the Batman of Marvel? Is it Daredevil? Is it Nighthawk? Is it Moon Knight? It doesn't matter. Hyperion is the problem with Hyperion is he's literally just a ripoff as all of the
Squadron Supreme. Yeah,
Squadron Supreme. Yeah, I was gonna call him Supreme Power, but that was a different comic about them. Squadron Supreme. Yeah. And I look, I will continue to go on about how great that David F. Walker Nighthawk run was, which did find a way to kind of separate him from Batman. But
that particular Nighthawk is different than the original introduced Nighthawk, who was just a Batman ripoff.
Yes, yeah.
Who, if I'm remembering correctly, his superpower was he was as strong as 2 strong guys, but only at night.
Yeah. Comic book idea, but only at night. There's a limit to his powers, you guys. And he's even still, he's only 2 guys. Strength of 2 men. And you're like, cool.
Well, he's as strong as 2 strong guys, John. Imagine really one strong guy and then another strong guy, but they're in one guy.
Yeah, it's like 2 Lou Ferrignos. But no, I think the thing about this movie, though, really, it does come down to they have this great cast, which we already knew all these people were great in these parts.
Also, it's just given as wrote that David Harbour is amazing.
Dude is the most charming son of a bitch on the planet. And if you didn't already love Red Guardian, my God, is he endearing in this movie.
He is the heart of the team.
He really is. He's so sweet. He's the only guy who wants to be there. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, that's the whole thing, is he sees this whole thing as like, my time to shine. Like...
Yeah, this is the origin story of a great super team. I can see it forming in my eyes, and his whole arc in this movie is just convincing everyone else that he's right.
Yeah, I mean, his arc is he just gets reactivated. He doesn't have an arc so much as just like, as soon as he sees his opportunity, he takes it, and he's the only one who sees this. And it's just like, what do we call the Thunderbolts based on Yelena's, Pewee soccer team? Great, let's do it. Nah.
The joke with the girl who pooped herself in the middle of the game is one of the funniest runners.
But the idea, that's the one thing they both remember. Terrible, lost him. And also the argument about who sponsored it. Shane Steiners didn't have the money. They couldn't afford to sponsor a team. Anyway, he's the best. But I was going to say, I think this script is really solid. When people talk about this being one of the best Marvel movies, I think a lot of that is the screenplay, is the way that they tie, and this is not an insult to other Marvel movies, because I think some have done this, and I think, as we've often said, people are way too harsh on some of the Marvel movies. But I think the way that they tie the threat to the characters is really, really strong. And that the end of the movie is them all needing to hug Bob.
Yeah. Is very good.
Is so you're just like, oh wow, they found a way to still do superhero punch 'em up, but have it mean something more than just superhero punch thing.
Well, because superhero punch thing, but superhero also have to punch self sometimes, and that can be unhealthy, and so they need other superheroes around them to stop them from doing that.
Well, that whole moment when they're inside of the void and Bob is beating the void, and they're like, actually, that's not the way to do it. You don't beat your depression down. That's not actually the healthy way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Something I didn't notice, somebody just pointed it out, because the whole idea is once they're all in the void, you're sort of living your worst trauma, right? Is kind of the idea.
Or you're stuck in these series of rooms that represent your darkest memories. Or,
I didn't clock. I've seen the movie twice, and I didn't clock this. And I mean, it's real quick. So, but somebody freeze framed it. When Bucky enters the final room, behind him is the Winter Soldier lab.
Yeah, I caught that. Yeah.
I didn't see, but like that it just is from the Winter Soldier, or from I think the beginning of Civil War that you actually see that.
No, I think you do see it in. Well, you see a couple different versions of it. The one that's in Russia, you only see in Civil War.
Yeah, that's the one it is. It's pulled from that movie. But that's so cool. And I also love. I mean, look, I already love Bucky. Winter Soldier's one of my favorite characters in the comics, too, because of course he is. He's a damaged, formerly brainwashed assassin. That's my jam. That's just my shit, man. I would read a whole series of novels about this guy. But the thing I like about this is he's actually the most well-rounded of them because he's been dealing with his trauma for the past several movies and TV shows. So the idea that he's just like, yeah, horrible shit happened to me. I've kind of made peace with that, though. And that's why he becomes the de facto leader of the team. Is because just the idea about, like, we don't even see him go through his void rooms. And I just love that line where he's like, oh, yeah, no, nothing in my past that I have to deal with, or, pains and nightmares and stuff like that. I'm totally fine.
I didn't spend years in Wakanda being rehabilitated by the Dora Milaje or anything.
Right, but it is sort of the idea about, like, this is a guy who's got and also just, as we see, when he rolls into the movie, or at least into the action of the movie, he can do all the shit on his own.
Right, yeah. I mean,
he can just start blowing up trucks and riding a motorcycle. I mean, and dude, when he grabs that guy's shotgun and spins it around and pumps, he's just like, oh yeah, this is a guy who's just good at being a super soldier.
I mean, in a clear homage to Terminator 2, which I very much appreciated.
Oh, yeah. And I love, of course, all the Red Guardian fanboying. That's what I talk about!
I do love those two in the front of the truck at the end of the movie being like, plan? Drive truck through front of building.
Well, because Bucky is also not Steve, so Bucky is just, I'm going to smash into this building and start punching shit. Right. But even still, the way they undercut that, they start out the big fight, and then Valentina just comes over going, hey, could you guys knock that off? It's really expensive when you break the drywall I just put up. Just come upstairs, my God.
But another, thematic thing that it connects, and maybe we can use this as a transition to start talking about Andor, is how all these characters in Thunderbolts, and we see this in Andor as well, have this reflection of exhaustion when it comes to, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think Yelena is obviously the, largest central part of this, when the opening of the movie is her literally monologuing about how she's just so tired and done with doing these super assassin jobs. I
mean, this idea of what is this even for? I'm not helping anyone. It seems like, and they just keep sending me again and again to blow up this thing, to kill this person.
No, you don't understand.
I mean, that whole thing where she's, the whole opening with her in the lab is great. Mm-hmm. And just her being like, oh, and the guy pulls a gun. She's like, please don't.
Yeah. But it's a fun new take, because so often when we have these characters who become dissatisfied with what they do, there's this dramatic breakdown. I mean, it's the classic Spider-Man leaving his costume in the garbage can and walking away thing, right? Or Daredevil saying he can never be Daredevil again for the umpteenth time.
Well, that guy's guilt knows no bounds.
But this is a character who is just going through the motions, but still continuing to be dissatisfied with what they do. Not quitting in a dramatic fashion, but being like, "Oh, we're still doing this? Okay."
Yeah, because there's no real alternative to it. She's not going to go work a normal job, so it's like, I hate this, but like, what else am I going to do? I mean, what? She's like, I want to do something more public facing, and you get Valentina going like, well, we'll talk about that, and you're like, that means no.
Yeah, and the same goes for Walker. Like, U.S. agent in this whole movie is just like, well, clearly his life has fallen apart because all he can really do is these sort of black ops jobs, because
he's kind of a dick,
messed himself up, and he's like, he's very much a dick.
But he is aware of that. I mean, that's the thing about when we see the scene of him with his kid, and he's reading his own bad press, is like, on some level, this guy is aware that he is not a good dude.
And it's eating him alive inside.
Yeah. But he's also not doing the work to fix that, apparently. And he's treating his wife like shit, and he's ignoring his kid, and you're just like, yeah, this guy's just toxic, but it's all because he refuses. I mean, sorry, the buzzword, if this upsets him. It's a toxic masculinity. He's refusing. He's going like, no, man, I'm not going to look inside. Fuck that,
I'm the best at guns and military, so that should make me a good dude, right?
Yeah, why don't people, instead of going like, what am I doing to make people not like me? He's like, why don't people like me? I mean, I love the moment when Bob is laughing, and he's like, what? He's like, did you say you were Captain America? Yeah, it's like, but you're an asshole. I do think the way, once again, Pullman is so the key to this movie, and you love him so much. I just loved, I rooted for Bob at every turn, because that guy is just likable like his dad. They just both have, he and his dad, Bill Pullman, are the two most just likable fucking dudes on the planet. His ability to do that, and so then when he becomes the Void and stuff like that, you're just like, no. The whole way, all through the Valentina manipulation of him, you're just like, oh no. Even when he's in the Sentry suit, as cool as it looks, you're like, that ain't you, Bob.
When they dye his hair, and it's just like,
the dyeing
really
the hair.
Do that? And Valentina being like, well, it tested well.
I do like the idea of him going like, as that scene goes on, he goes, you know what? I'm thinking the hair is a bad idea now. Now that I see it, I liked it at first, but I don't think it's me,
Well, he's a guy that's clearly open to being manipulated because he doesn't have a clear sense of what he should be doing, and falling ass backwards into being the most powerful entity on the planet is maybe not good for his already broken mental health.
Yeah, this is a guy who really needs to ground himself in just being a person, and they're going to make him a god. And I also love that whole thing where it's like, well, who said you were a god? It's like, well, you said I was more powerful than all the Avengers combined. And one of them is a god, so
logic would dictate.
And once again, I can never say enough things about Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but her moment, she's just like, oh shit! Like when he starts to realize, and she's just like, God, it's going this way. I didn't want this. Oh God, he's realizing that he's infinitely more powerful than anyone, and he has no reason to listen to me.
It's that moment from Veep where she's just like still smiling, but going, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Oh, God. I mean, look, if you haven't watched Veep, please do. It's one of the greatest shows ever. I mean, actually, watch her in anything. She's just one of the greatest comedic performers, because obviously I can go all day about Seinfeld.
Sure.
And she does not get enough credit for actually being maybe the funniest character on Seinfeld.
Yeah. No, everyone remembers the Kramer gags, but like consistent hilarity is...
But the more I watch it, the more she kills every single line reading. You're just like, man, are you? Yeah, I mean, truly one of the greatest comedic performers, and like a lot of great comedians, a great actress. When she needs to be serious, when she needs to be scary in this movie, she brings it.
I just watched it was probably like a 45-minute reel of all the best her and Patrick Warburton scenes in that show.
Oh my God. I mean, that's the only spinoff I would have considered from Seinfeld, is the two of them.
Yeah.
Because they are so funny together. He's just a big dummy. And she both hates and is so into him.
Yeah.
There's now you poke the bear by bringing up Seinfeld, but There is a whole episode that is just them on a long overseas plane ride.
Oh, that one is so good.
They keep breaking up and getting back together over the course of one flight.
So you're just going to sit there and stare into the middle distance? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole runner about how he only eats Arby's. What do you want to do for dinner? Feels like an Arby's night. God damn it. Yeah. It's the best. It's the best.
So good.
Anyway, yeah. So she's great though, and the whole manipulation of, and the idea that this is a woman who never thinks about the morality of the thing. Like, because we have, oh man, I think I know how to say this name, which is Geraldine Viswanathan, I believe is the pronunciation.
Plays Mel.
Yeah. Who is a small character, but is super important as the person who just keeps going like, hey, are we sure that that's a good... And Valentina is not even considering. She's not even listening to that question. She's already... No, this is what we're doing.
Hey, are we like the baddies?
That's exactly what her character is in this. And the whole moment where she's talking about like, hey, this guy seems really broken. We've given him a bunch of powers. And she and all Valentina wants to know is, do I look maternal enough in this outfit to continue to manipulate him? And that she's feeding information to Bucky because she's just like, I just work here and I think we might be doing evil.
I'm not 100%, but we may in fact be supervillains here.
Yeah, I just think all that stuff is great. And she was also a last minute addition because this was supposed to be Io Edebiri from The Bear was supposed to play Mel.
Yeah, and this may or may not be...
it's mostly a fan theory. It's never been fully confirmed by Marvel, but like anything in this could become a character.
Yeah, who may or may not be the character Songbird, who was a member of the Thunderbolts at a certain point.
I think could be is very clear. There is no reason to see this movie and think that that's going to happen, but maybe. She's a very good actress. I like her. I've liked her in everything I've seen her in. She has a real funny presence. If you haven't seen Miracle Workers, the show she and Daniel Radcliffe did.
Oh, yeah. Love that show.
Yeah, because that's really a two-hander between those two, and it's a great show, and she's really funny in it. And she's Australian, which I only found out somewhat recently, and like, God damn it, is anyone from America?
Nope.
Nope. No, not a single one. There's no Americans in this cast. Wyatt Russell, what's he? Balkan? No. He's. I mean, look. Fuck the whole. I gotta say, I'm so tired of the nepo baby shit. Because Wyatt Russell and Lewis Pullman are just two great actors. The fact that their dads are movie stars hardly matters.
I mean, it. Only insofar as, like, do these people have a sort of a leg up in terms of, like, being seen or getting in front of the right people? Yes. But, like, people like Jack Quaid will fully admit that sort of thing as well.
The response I always have to that is, I do think it gets you in the room, but I can't think of many people who have just been handed movie star careers. Like, you still do have to prove yourself. If people don't want to see you, they will not put you in the movie.
Sure. How many Baldwins are out there that, like, probably can be cast simply by the fact that they look vaguely like a Baldwin, but beyond that, they gotta prove it.
The ultimate example to me is Will Smith tried to buy his son, Jaden, a movie star career. Where's that kid now?
Did he transition fully into trying to do a rap career? I don't remember.
I think so, but I think even that's dried up. It's just like, you still need the talent in order to... Marvel's not going to make you a superhero because your dad's Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
And that guy's just good. Mm-hmm. These people are good. And as people talk about, in any industry, you have benefits from having family in it. It's just this one is so public. And I think also a big piece of it is so many people want to do it that they're jealous. You know, there's a jealousy aspect of it too. It's like, well, I want to be in movies. Why should Lewis Pullman get to be in this movie just because his dad is Bill Pullman? You know,
look, the job that I do is my day job. I got into, like, because my dad knew a guy and he pointed me in the right direction. But does that mean that, like, I'm still in it 4 years later because I can't do the job? Like,
I mean, I do say, hey, that nepo baby Gorgoni all the time. But,
I mean, it's true. I really am.
Yeah.
But, like, that's just how, like, life is. You know people who know people, and hopefully that can get your foot in the door in certain places.
The whole thing about Hollywood, right, is that it is the old adage, but it's true. It's about who you know, and whether that's through family or other connections. It really is about connections.
Sure.
There are people who have a bigger leg up than having a famous movie star just from, like, I went to college and interned at Steven Spielberg's company, so Spielberg gave me
Will I forever be slightly angry at Christopher Paolini, the author of the Aragon series, because his parents helped found a publishing house? Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea, too. Just also, if you have money, you can make a movie because somebody can back it or whatever.
But ultimately, people read those books, see those movies, trust those people with those jobs because they eventually, or at least the hope is, they prove themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Cruise's kid did like one movie, and I don't know if he didn't want to do more, but he didn't make much of an impression. You ever heard of Connor Cruise?
Nope.
Yeah. And his dad is Tom Cruise.
I didn't realize he had a son biologically and that he didn't reproduce by budding.
Actually, it's not his son biologically. He's adopted, but that's neither here.
Neither here nor there.
Yeah, I mean, good thing. Yeah. Anyway, let's switch over to Andor and talk about there any Nepo babies in this?
Speaking of a cast with 0 Americans.
Oh yeah, I don't. The one guy who I was surprised is the guy who played Cyril.
Stellan Skarsgård. No.
Yeah. No, Kyle Soller, who played Cyril, is from America, and he seemed like a Brit. I think just because he's playing a Imperial character.
Denise Gough is Ireland.
Oh yeah.
Obviously Diego Luna.
Mexico.
Yep. Let's see. Adria Arona is
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
Still
American. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give her that. But I think pretty much everybody else is UK or Mexico.
Obviously, like, the big standout in season 2, at least to me, is Elizabeth Dulau. Where is she from?
Yeah.
Does not say, because she's come out of nowhere with this show.
No, that's because they hired her right out of drama school. Literally, she talked about she graduated from drama school and got this part.
Holy crap!
She's from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts.
That tracks. Okay,
very, very prestigious.
Got it.
Yeah,
I mean, you say drama school, that immediately makes me think it's British. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, but she went to, like, I mean, there are a few, but RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, is about as prestigious as it gets. So, I mean, it's not that crazy to get a job out of there.
Faye Marseille is from Middlesbrough.
Yeah, no, they're pretty much all.
Yep.
Pretty much all. I mean, Genevieve O'Reilly, I think, is also Irish.
Totally.
I mean, her name is Genevieve O'Reilly.
I would. Yeah, I'm not going to make any assumptions here, but
pretty fucking up. Hey, Benjamin Bratt's ours.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Varada Sethu, who plays Cinta, is from India. Very good.
Yeah, who's also, man. What a good time to be her, because she's also the companion on Doctor Who right now. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pretty good. She just runs Disney Plus at this point, basically.
Let's see.
But yeah.
Joplin Sibtain is, there we go, from Waltham Forest in London.
Well, we should also mention this show. Alan Tudyk is American, despite the fact he rarely plays them, I feel like. But Ben Mendelsohn is Australian. Yes. But this show...
By the way, all those people we just listed, phenomenal actors, and this cast is so stacked. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I mean, a few people they inherited from Rogue One, but then everyone they added to this also is astounding. I mean, everybody in this show is really amazing. I feel like people like Denise Gough and Kyle Soller, I didn't really know before this, but now I'm like a big fan of theirs.
Yeah, I mean... you can go back into our archives and listen to our episode when we talked about the first season of Andor a couple of years ago. Obviously, spoilers abound for Andor Season 2, but also, this is leading to Rogue One. We know where this goes.
At least for Andor. I mean, I think that, we know Cassian Andor's journey and some of these other characters like Mon Mothma and stuff, obviously, just from knowing Star Wars. Sure. But I think, the bigger questions were the other characters in it, right? And what was going to be.
I never assumed that Stellan Skarsgård's character was walking away from this.
Well, I mean, that was because that's kind of the path he was on, right?
Yeah. And like,
this was a guy who, I think actually both Luthen and Cassian, and really any of these characters, are certainly prepared to give their lives for this cause, especially by the end of the show.
Well, and like historically, I say in air quotes, because like historically in this era of the Star Wars universe, this is sort of a doomed time period. And because like Episode 4, man, is called A New Hope. Everything prior up to this point is the dark times.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things this show really does that I like about it, though, is it doesn't take away from anything that our heroes did. But it does create this thing that Luke Skywalker kind of comes in at the best time for him. Like, I could understand the idea of having some bitterness towards him if you're a longtime rebel going like, well, he wasn't there when it was real bad news. And we were like, well, I mean, like, is Luthen Rael now maybe the most important character in Star Wars, at least in terms of the rebellion?
Without him, does the rebellion coalesce in the way that it does? No, probably not.
I'm just saying, like, the idea that they have now created this character who is now retroactively, like, central to the whole thing. Because Mon Mothma doesn't go on the journey she goes on without Luthen. Cassian doesn't. None of the rebellion. I mean, because guys like Saw Gerrera, the whole point of him, right, is that guy was never gonna get the group together. He's a fucking nut job.
Look, just because he's inhaling gas fumes.
I mean, literally, he has that one episode where when they're trying to put together that weapon, and he literally goes like, when somebody's like, "You're crazy," he's like, "Yeah, you're goddamn right, I'm crazy, and you should be crazy too. We all need to be crazy.
Rebellions aren't for the sane."
And the last scene with him too, where he's talking to the rebel command, and he's just like, "I'm not gonna join your little band." Like, you're like, that guy is a terrorist, and he likes being a terrorist.
Well, and
he likes causing trouble.
I will say, one of the most satisfying narrative experiences I've had. Yeah, that's fair. Is watching Andor season 2 and then going straight into watching Rogue One. Did you rewatch Rogue One after you finished this season?
No, I haven't watched it immediately after it, but I will, and it's all there. I mean,
the retroactive weight that this season specifically of Andor gives to Rogue One is astonishing, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know that we've ever seen anything quite like it in terms of prequel,
The only thing I've been comparing it to is Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
And Better Call Saul is doing this magic trick of interweaving this character that we knew from Breaking Bad in a way that is both, like, astonishing and like giving more weight to certain actions that we know about later on, and so that it kind of flows into that show and then eventually starts weaving in and out of that show in some really surprising ways. What this show, what Andor does though, doesn't really weave in and out of the events of Rogue One. In fact, it doesn't at all. But it creates this gravity and this narrative weight to these specific moments in Rogue One that is just like a really triumphant level of prequel writing.
I think something we've talked a lot about, both of us have really responded to in a lot of the Disney-made stuff, including things like Rebels, is this idea that they're really building the rebellion. You're really getting a sense of the rebellion in a way that when we meet them in A New Hope, they're basically fully formed. You're just getting like, oh, they're an oppositional army.
Yeah.
They're what we've seen between Rebels and Andor and some other stuff as well is this sense of like, I mean, I think Solo even has a little bit of it too. This idea that's like, oh, it was all these loose ideas of, I don't like the Empire. I don't like the Empire. I'm going to do something about it here. I'm going to do something about it here. And then it took a long time for all these threads to come together. And actually, I mean, I love the moment near the end of this season when they basically have to tell Cassian, it's like, hey, man, it's time for people to have ranks. And like, we need to organize that. We can't just fuck around anymore. The war is started, and you can't just be badass, lone wolf spy. We need order.
Luthen's way of doing things becomes outdated as this coalesces into a true oppositional force to the Empire, right? Like, having these lone wolf cells becomes more obsolete when it becomes not an insurgency, but a civil war within the galaxy.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing that's been so cool to see that, like I said, that it just, the thing about Andor is that I think more than any other Star Wars show, and it seems ridiculous to say, but it's 100% true, this is the most realistic Star Wars thing I've ever seen. Everything feels so real in a way that I've never, and it's not just because there's not Jedi stuff, but just in general, just how grounded everything. The show also has the space to do things like, holy shit, they have morning TV in Star Wars. There's a paparazzi droid at a fancy event. There's just little things where you're like, oh, the world just feels so much more tactile than it ever has.
One of the things I glommed onto, because this is the sort of nerd I am, I'm a huge fan of Mike Duncan's podcast Revolutions. He's the guy who did the History of Rome show. His current show Revolutions is continuing after a bit of a long hiatus recently. But he does a very good job of highlighting the histories and the makeups of different historical revolutions and how they sort of coalesce. And one of the ongoing themes of that show, and just like historical documentation in general, is there is no beginning, there is no end, right? Like, how do you qualify the beginning of a thing? And in this particular instance, it is revolutions or rebellions or insurgencies. And what you were talking about with this Disney era is showing that, like, okay, there are these glimmers that start even right as the Empire is beginning to take charge. And even in going back to the Clone Wars, like, where we introduce Saw Gerrera, we have this, like, okay, there's this insurgent population that exists trying to undermine the separatists in this one particular world. And even in there, you can see the spark of a rebellion forming that will eventually resist, which I know is resistance is the thing that happens later, but anyway, will resist an occupying force like the Empire.
Right, and that's the thing, is it's a little aimless when it's under Saw Gerrera. You get the sense Saw Gerrera is kind of a guy who's going to be upset no matter what.
Well,
like, that guy's going to blow shit up for just because I think he likes blowing shit up.
Once he starts huffing that Rhydonium, like, it really becomes, like, a problem.
I gotta say, also, I mean, Forrest Whitaker's already one of my favorite actors, but his commitment to, I'm gonna play this guy no matter what context he's in or medium, I love.
And I do love that we kind of have the full spectrum of this guy now. To, like, starts from scarred war guy whose sister is killed during the Clone Wars and is, like, doing his best to protect his world, to a fully insane guy who has mind control slugs that he just, like, throws people at.
Yeah. I feel like I feel like a lot of people met him in Rogue One, and you're like, that guy's so weird, and you're like, oh, there's a whole journey to go on with this dude.
Yeah.
But like the idea that he shows up and he's in the first Jedi game, right?
He's in both of them, because, like, your little squad that you're with in Jedi Survivor answers, or at least has contact with Saw Gerrera.
But just the idea that Forrest Whitaker's like, you call me.
But he also shows up in a couple of different arcs in Rebels. He shows up in Bad Batch. Like, I think he's in pretty much every distillation of, like, the different moments in time.
Academy Award winner Forrest Whitaker is there, baby.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, I've heard this about Joe Mantegna on The Simpsons, who plays Fat Tony. And he's just like, if he coughs, you bring me in. No one else plays Fat Tony.
And maybe some of that's just like, look, the residuals on this guy are off the charts.
I mean, maybe, but also it is just like, I love that commitment to character. I'm one character in this massive universe, and I want to be him.
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah, that's great, and I have the design of him is cool. I do have a Saw Gerrera action figure because he looks rad as hell with his robot leg and shit.
Well, and one of the fun parts about Saw Gerrera, like as just character design, is tracking where the bits of him get added slowly over the course of we see him.
Over the course of just Andor, you're watching him get more insane looking.
Yeah.
And that wig, man. Oh, God, that wig is so nuts.
And that is sort of a result. The wild part about that wig is that it's a result of the reshoots for Rogue One, right?
Well, actually, this whole show is a result of the reshoots of Rogue One, because we need to talk about Tony Gilroy, right, who is the showrunner here, and the de facto uncredited writer-director of a lot of Rogue One.
Right. Some of the quotes from Tony Gilroy since this show has wrapped up have been so heartening, how he is like attempting to be this unifying bridge between people who scoff at like quote unquote silly Star Wars that Filoni and Favreau are doing and the quote unquote serious Star Wars. And Gilroy's just out there being like, no man, I wouldn't exist if not for those guys. Like they're the muscle behind everything.
I think it's an interesting thing. I want to get back to Gilroy, but I do think it's an interesting thing, which is I think a lot of the negativity about Star Wars, and I always balk at this, the whole idea about like, that ain't Star Wars. Like that statement, I just, because I think one of the things the Disney era has given us, particularly in the Disney Plus series, is what I do like about them, even if I like some shows more than others, or some movies more than others, is the idea that you can tell all kinds of stories within Star Wars. You can have a Goonies style thing with Skeleton Crew. You can have a spaghetti western with The Mandalorian. You can have a dark spy show about resistance fighters in Andor. You can do the Lone Samurai show with Obi-Wan and stuff like that. There's all these different kinds of stories. And honestly, that's the thing when people go like, that ain't Star Wars, it's just like, then you're trying to kill Star Wars. Because if it doesn't diversify, then there's no reason to keep making this much of it.
Because if the only Star Wars you consider Star Wars is what was released in 1977, then I guess just stick with that movie and nothing else.
Because I have seen both extreme reactions to this show. I have seen the people who go like, finally, this is the only Star Wars I'm interested in because it's serious, it's aimed at adults. And then I've seen the people who go, this ain't Star Wars because it's not about Jedi, it's not a fantasy fairy tale aimed at children, so it's bullshit, man. And I'm just going like wow.
The other, not even the other extreme, but the level of extremity that is, this show is boring and I can't engage with it.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah,
isn't isn't Star Wars supposed to be fun? I've seen that.
Or like I can't engage with it because it has introduced themes of sexual assault, which is a thing that happens this season.
Man, that people really got bent out of shape about that. Like Star Wars should never talk about that.
Well, it's this thing where I understand where people are coming from, whereas if that is a triggering theme for them, if they don't want to engage with that in their media and they go to Star Wars knowing with a certainty that they won't be confronted with that, I can understand how when it's suddenly very jarringly about a fascist dictatorship abusing their power in specific locations, how that can take people by surprise. And when you say get bent out of shape, like they're surprised and triggered by this, like, I didn't think that was ever going to be in Star Wars. And I can understand that, but to say that it ruins Star Wars for them is the level of hyperbole that we...
Or the idea of people who like shame the creators for including that in some way, like, you shouldn't include. It's one thing to be surprised by it and react to it. It's another thing to say that has no place in this universe. When, honestly, when that happened, my thought was, of course that was happening. Are you kidding me? Under all, I mean, I saw Adria Arjona, I believe is how you pronounce her name. I looked it up.
Okay.
And she was talking about, she's like, it would be, irresponsible of us not to indicate that was happening. Trying to treat this seriously, of this totalitarian regime that is, got the... Of course, sexual assault would be part of that.
Well, and her character of Bix is so when you talk about how grounded this show is, her character is one that is grounded in the abuses of the Empire and how a character responds to the most extreme abuses of a fascist dictatorship. Whereas she is kind of tortured out of hand in the first season using the screams of dying children as a method of torture.
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, just brutal stuff.
Well, in her arc in the early chunks of this season, trying to recover from that over years and finding closure in the assassination of the guy responsible for it, which is maybe one of the most satisfying moments this season when her and Cassian kill that dude and blow up his building.
I mean, the other thing that, it is, absolutely. But the thing I mean, this is so my jam, obviously, I've always loved the operatives, the black ops people, the spec ops, the idea of the people who Luke Skywalker's the hero you put out front, but behind a guy like Luke Skywalker are a bunch of people who are doing nasty, dark shit that you don't want to know about. And these people are murderers. Now, they may be doing it for the right cause, but I love that moment when Cassian is getting Mon Mothma off of Coruscant, and he just ices her driver.
Yeah.
And she's like, fuck, because it's like she's never had to confront. But in Cassian's mind, there is no, this is kill or be killed.
Well, and it really crystallizes what a armed resistance to the Empire is going to be for Mon Mothma. Because that's the make or break moment for her.
Absolutely, where it is like, no, you need to go now, and this is what we're doing. And that's where, of course, you get the great welcome to the rebellion. Like, now you're one of us. You've always been sympathetic to the cause, but now you are a rebel. And next we see her, she looks like she does in Return of the Jedi, and she's on Yavin.
I will say there is a slight disconcerting air between, if you go directly into Rogue One from watching the finale of Andor. Like, Genevieve O'Reilly is suddenly younger, which is always going to happen when you're making a prequel, right?
I mean, it's one of the things Gilroy talked about, that Disney wanted 5 seasons of this show. And what he said is, he goes, Diego's face won't hold up.
Yeah.
It's gonna eventually get weird.
Right.
And so the idea was, I'll give you 2 seasons that cover 5 years of story.
Yeah, and I think that was the smarter decision here.
Yeah, he's just like, we just can't, man. It's just going to get too weird.
Because it would have been 5 seasons over like...
and in his 30s. You know?
It would have been 5 seasons over the course of like 7 or 8 years, and by the time you like are leading into Rogue One, suddenly these people have aged. It would have ended up being a total of like 15 years since they filmed Rogue One.
Well, I just saw a thing somebody put that the final episode aired the same day Disney announced Diego Luna was starring in Rogue One.
Oh, that's funny.
And so a decade right there. And, he's 45 now. He would have been easily 50 plus by the time that 5 seasons was over.
Right, yeah.
And then we would have been going back to when he was 35.
Right.
Like, he's a good-looking guy, and I'm sure he still is going to look great in his 50s, but he won't look like he did when he was in his 30s, and it would be very...
There are lines on those faces that were not there before.
I gotta say, man, I do think... He's an actor I've always really liked a lot, Diego Luna. I feel like he gets taken for granted a little bit when people talk about this show. He is the center of it, and he is so good. But I feel like everybody, because so many other people have the juicier parts, but he is the guy who has to hold the center. And I often feel that is a thing that gets overlooked when people talk about great performances. Being the leading man, being the action hero, at the center of a thing, oftentimes you're like, well, of course he's good. But he's really good.
When I talked about the weight that is retroactively put on Rogue One, all of that is Diego Luna's performance in Rogue One is suddenly given so much more context, so much more like empathetic pain that you feel for this character as he is approaching his final doom in that film. But he is building on everything we've seen in Andor to become this hero in the moment in that movie. And what Diego Luna is doing in this show is retroactively giving all of his performance in the movie this emotional depth that really plays. It's so good.
I think there's a reason they obviously focused on him for a show, because I remember seeing that movie and immediately wanting to know more about this guy.
Yeah.
Cassian Andor as a character, his performance. I will say, this show I haven't rewatched Rogue One, but this show can only, unfortunately, what's the word I'm looking for? Expand my main issue with Rogue One, which is I think Jyn Erso is a horribly ill-defined character.
She especially if you watch Rogue One following the last season.
Because now Cassian has an insane amount of context, and he was already the character I found much more interesting.
Jyn feels a little bit like how they use Clea in the last 3 episodes of this season of Andor. A character who is clearly important and is there, but is given a lot more to do all of a sudden. Clea is, we were talking about her before, but Elizabeth Dulau, who plays Luthen's assistant, who's...
Gilroy has talked about, was just so blown away by every time he gave her anything in the first season that he's like, oh, I'm going to expand this character, purely based on how good her performance is.
And, like, I don't know if you read it this way, maybe Cassian's sister?
Oh, Jesus. Possibly?
The way it's edited and the way it's framed, especially in the last 3 episodes, like, I've seen some other people discussing this online. It's very ambiguous, but, like, the very real possibility that, like, the timelines do kind of line up and, like, I don't know, maybe. The way it's presented in the show, it's definitely like, question mark?
I'm looking to see, because I thought I saw Gilroy say something about that.
I mean, if he's definitively said no, then sure, but...
well, because I do... One of the things I think that's... one of the things I love about... And this will get us back to Gilroy, because Gilroy is a guy who I'm a massive fan of. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. Because if he made nothing but Michael Clayton, I would love him. Michael Clayton's one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen Michael Clayton, it's nothing like Star Wars at all. But the thing about him, it's so. This was the thing I was saying that connects these two, because both he and Jake Schreier are not guys who, on paper, seem like obvious choices. The fact that they brought Gilroy in on Rogue One is an interesting choice, because I think aside from a dialogue polish on Armageddon, he's never worked in science fiction.
I mean, it depends on how you think about the Great Wall.
Well, okay, yeah, but I'm saying he's most famous for writing the Bourne movies, I would say, is probably...
Which are science fiction adjacent.
Yeah, I mean, in as much as science fiction crosses into a lot of... But, I mean, this is a guy who writes a lot of movies about lawyers and spies and cops and, intense character-driven dramas for adults. And so it's interesting that he brought... We only have what little reports we've heard about what the differences after he came in on Rogue One, what he added, what he changed. But it does sound like
basic context. If you go and watch the original trailers for Rogue One as they were released, it is very clear that there are big swaths of that movie that never made it into theaters, and that there were some like massive reshoots. Gareth Edwards is not famously, but like subtly stepped aside to let other people like rework the movie, and he was still given the directing credit, and like there doesn't seem to be any blood necessarily. But
no, he's pretty. But like Gilroy wrote those reshoots, he directed those reshoots, and he supervised the final cut of the movie.
Yeah.
So Edwards, they talk about Edwards wasn't like cut out, but he definitely ended up in second chair to Gilroy during the final stretch of that movie. And then I think it's very telling then that then he ends up running the show, right? I mean, that really paints the picture of, obviously, okay, particularly Cassian Andor really belongs to this guy, it feels like, in a lot of ways.
Sure.
He
is to Andor as what's his name is to Han Solo.
Kasdan.
Kasdan, yeah.
They may not have created these characters, but they really did define them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing about Gilroy that actually really works, and I think it's similar to the Schreier thing, is, and he will tell you this, he is not an encyclopedic knowledge of Star Wars. He is a casual fan at best. And similar to what you're talking about the podcast, when they talk about what Star Wars you're inspired by, he goes, no, I was reading Histories of Rebellions.
Yeah.
I'm not taking influence from other Star Wars movies, necessarily. There are people at Lucasfilm, I think the Massacre of Gorman is a perfect example of this. He wants a specific atrocity, and they go, hey, in our archives we have this thing. Oh, well, that works, right?
Yeah,
but it's
the Gorman Massacre is a famed event in Star Wars going all the way back to the Legends, and the fact that they even like wrap in the Legends version of the Gorman Massacre, which is when Tarkin lands his ship on a bunch of people, because that's what it was like going back into the like West End Games RPG days when they were filling in all these details.
Looking up the Gorman stuff, I am like, oh, I bet Gorgoni's thrilled that this started its life in the RPG.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but it's not. But what I'm saying is, he's not coming out of the thing going, "I can't wait to make that RPG." It's a natural thing of, I want to do a thing. Here's a thing that can match, and I think it's a perfect example of what we talk about when like sometimes being too in love with this stuff, J.J. Abrams, can actually be a problem. Or can potentially be a problem. I think it's one of the reasons why Filoni and Favreau work so well together, is you have a guy who's an encyclopedic knowledge and a guy who just is all about like, I love Star Wars as a kid. Mm-hmm. And they really fit together. And then you have a Gilroy who, there's a funny video you can find online of Gilroy's son just mocking him about like, how are you the guy running Star Wars right now? You don't know shit about it, Dad. And he's like, I don't. But that's not the most important stuff. Necessarily because once again, you can always call up the Lucasfilm library and go, what's the name of that planet?
What's important to telling a good story is not set dressing, right? It's character arcs and being able to create these compelling individuals that are surrounded in the set dressing of Star Wars. So, when you're writing characters like this, your job isn't to make sure that they reference the Gorman Massacre. Your job is to make sure that when they talk about the Gorman Massacre, they're doing so with emotion that rings true to people.
And they hired a guy whose background, like I said, on paper, you'd be like, oh, wait, he's never really worked on anything like set in space. But you're also looking at, but what does he write about? Spies, politics. You're like, oh, well, all of those things are part of Star Wars. He's just not using the space version of those things. But the fact that he's so good at getting into the heads of those people and what drives someone to work in espionage and stuff like that. Oh, that makes a lot of sense now.
And looking at any kind of historical context, you look at any revolution, there are always going to be these flashpoint moments that ring out through history. You've got your Bloody Sundays and your Boston Tea Parties, you're like, name a massacre, unfortunately, is the truth of the matter. It's like, you can insert proper noun massacre here, and you could find those events in every revolution in human history.
I mean, and I gotta say, since we're talking about it, the Gorman Massacre is one of the best sequences I've ever seen in Star Wars, in terms of piece of filmmaking.
One of the most compelling pieces of like on the ground chaotic eruption of fascist violence that has been put to film, and it's in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean I've never seen anything like it in Star Wars. I've never seen that level of violence shot that way. For a it's still in Star Wars, right? So it's not like it's gory because the weapons of Star Wars aren't really gore producing in the same way that bullets are and stuff like that. But the way it's filmed, it reminds me it's more akin to something like Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List than it is anything in Star Wars. It is shot in this really handheld way that embraces the chaos of it, right? It's just this nightmare, and it's unending. I don't know how long that sequence is exactly, but it's probably a half hour total.
I mean, that because that's the third arc is when the massacre actually goes off. Obviously, we're introduced to Gorman throughout the show. The Gorman blockade is mentioned in the first season when we are introduced to Mon Mothma. And the moment she said those words, I was like, oh, I know where this is going. As a huge dork who knows these
See, I didn't know that offhand because it is a thing that's existed in the canon, but kind of lightly. It was in the RPG game. Retroactively, I'm now told it was referenced in Rebels.
Yep, in the episode where Mon Mothma shows up, which is something, again, you can watch leading straight from Andor. There's kind of a handshake moment in this show where they're like, we're going to hand her off to Gold Squadron. And they're the ones who have her in the episode of Rebels she shows up in.
But, like, she mentions that in Rebels. I've seen that episode, but it didn't, like, Gorman didn't stick with me. What I saw is the historical thing. You're like, oh, this is France about to be occupied by the Nazis. This is a place of great reverence for art and culture and fashion.
Yeah.
And then of course the underground resistance is, and as Gilroy would remind you though, is like, and as you're saying, is like, well, you can connect it to France, but you can connect it to a lot of things because, as always, he's going, it's broad strokes. I'm not talking about anything specifically. If you're looking for me to be talking about Trump, I'm not. I'm talking about broad strokes authoritarianism.
You can connect it to France, you can connect it to Belgium, you can connect it to Mexico, you can connect it to any number of South American countries that were being governed by European powers at the turn of the 18th century.
Which to me, I think is very true to Star Wars and what Lucas was doing. Even if Lucas did bring up specific things, to me, I think the great power of science fiction, obviously, is the ability to be political broadly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can also be specific, but like a lot of the best stuff is timeless because it's talking about things that are just part of human history forever and common cycles, as we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. And the cycles of violence that like lead into revolution is part of like what Andor is discussing as a show. And it's so funny to me that something like this is lauded as the best of Star Wars when so many people online, and I know they're not the same people, I know the loudest voices just sort of sift to the top, but so many people are just like, keep politics out of my name X franchise here, when the most political franchise of the mass market franchises is Star Wars, right?
I think Star Trek would like to have a talk with you, maybe, but
that's like, they address singular issues on an episode-to-episode basis. Star Wars is about the struggle between fascism and democracy, and you
might argue that Star Trek is more about ethics than politics.
Sure, yeah, but like to the point where the sequel trilogy seemingly couldn't figure out another story to tell, so they immediately had to default to fascism versus democracy again.
I gotta say, the more we get stuff now, the angrier I do get at those movies.
And look, I don't want to hold that anger in my heart, so I just have to like let it go and stop thinking about it.
And then there's me, who's just like stewing in my rage. They're getting worse every year. Except for that second one, which is great, but unfortunately is done in by having to pull threads on the first movie and retroactively seed the third movie, so it gets ruined.
I was having a discussion with a high schooler. I work at a school. And I was having a discussion with a high schooler. He found out I had a Star Wars podcast, so he was like trying to do that thing that kids always do when they find out you think you're an expert in a thing, and that's try to stump you, right? And like he was going on about how like he was kind of parroting that sentiment online of like, oh, and of course the sequels suck. And as like a responsible Star Wars fan, I feel it is necessary for there to be people like me with a voice saying like, okay, but people thought the sequels suck. People thought the prequels sucked when they first came out. There were people who saw Empire Strikes Back and said, well, this isn't Star Wars.
I think and I'm once again, I'm always want to say this isn't Star Wars. If you like those movies, I have no issue with that. I think to me, the issue with those sequels is the inverse of the prequels. I think the thing with the prequels is the broad stroke stuff is really good. The overarching stories are amazing. It's individual stuff, dialogue, character work that really falls apart.
And the opposite is true on the sequels.
And then in that case I think actually the character work and dialogue is pretty strong of the sequels, but it really botches all the broad strokes arcs in a way that makes it very disappointing, and particularly disappointing for me in the way it connects back to the original trilogy, because to me, and I always say this, to me, and particularly now watching this Andor and seeing all the sacrifices and everything, it kind of undoes everything that the Rebel Alliance did, and basically makes it like, well, then why did I watch those movies? And not in an interesting way. I'm saying you could make an interesting thing where it's like they failed to build the world they were trying to live in. I just wish that was I don't know. That's
one of
me.
those moments. I think there is a good highlight of what you're talking about in the Disney era shows explicitly. Now that we've reached the end of Andor, Mon Mothma is such a huge part of it. Genevieve O'Reilly brings such depth of character to a background character from Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, who was essentially just, we need someone to be the leader of the Rebel Alliance. And it's her, and that woman had presence. There's no question that she stood, stood out to me in that movie. But yes, is so greatly expanded in these things into this amazing character.
But, so we have this, like, sacrifice and willingness to commit to a cause and building something that's important that will help ensure freedom. We have a character who we know achieves those things, but then we also know that that character is still there and helping cement the seeds of erasing it in Ahsoka. We see Mon Mothma there, and like when people are coming and saying like, well, the First Order is maybe kind of like up to some shenanigans, and there's a Grand Admiral out there who's really up to no good, and Mon Mothma is still complicit in the system that originally fell to a fascist dictatorship, and you can see her perpetuating the cycles of that will eventually lead to the rise of an empire-like entity again, and you're just like, Mon, did we learn nothing?
The other the thing that I really balk at in that idea is that it just happened. It wasn't generations ago. And they go like, well, that's not going to happen again. You just fucking saw it happen.
And look, we're living through unprecedented times in which the pace of change is terrifying, right? Like, we can see how quickly things can change in a society, and it makes, like, this whole idea that, like, oh, the Jedi were just 20 years ago. How could people forget? And now we're living through a time where it's like, can you remember like how the world was 10 years ago, John? Like, it's hard because things have changed so radically so quickly.
Sure, I mean, for sure. And I think one of the things I really like in this show as well is, once again, in the grounding of it. And something when I saw Gilroy talking about where people go like, hey, are we ever going to see the Emperor? Or are we going to see Darth Vader? He's like, no. Because we could. I think he talked about... Story. There was almost a scene with Palpatine at some point in some, which could have been, but it does feel like one of the things I really like about this, and I like this in Rogue One too, although, I mean, obviously you do get those characters in Rogue One, but they're given like a pedestal. That, I mean, the idea that, and actually I just heard somebody talking about this idea that you keep going like, oh man, Dedra is the worst of the Empire, man. But then Krennic's above her. But then we know in Rogue One, Krennic gets bitch slapped by Tarkin and then Vader. And so it's just this whole idea that like you can just keep going up the chain. Whoever's in front of you at the moment is the person with the boot heel. By the way, that Dedra is done in by the system she helped build is as perfect a piece of writing as I could imagine.
It's pure poetry.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect ending to her. Is the idea that it's just like, oh no, I mean, that's always the thing, right, about fascism, right, is the idea is eventually it gets pointed at you. It's inevitable.
Or either it gets pointed at you, or you realize just how fragile the system you've helped perpetuate is, and you can see it breaking around you, and so the only way out is a bullet to your own skull. The whole thing with Pendergast at the end of this season being the Hitler in the bunker moment was absolutely perfect.
You're talking about him. I was talking about also Cyril is an interesting, his downfall is like, I don't even know what that guy doesn't even know what he believes anymore by the end of it. And also
Cyril Karn's arc as the fascist who is trying to perpetuate this is a system that brings us security mentality, but eventually like sees the horrors that simple idealism will rot.
But isn't not enough to turn rebel, but just to go like, I don't know if I'm on board, and then he's dead.
Cyril's an interesting counterpoint to a character from Rebels, which is Agent Kallus, right? Agent Kallus is the same character, but survives and eventually does go rebel.
Right.
And given an opportunity, maybe Cyril walks away from this and like, no, this whole system needs to burn. I've seen the worst of it.
But he's done in by his own personal obsession with Cassian Andor, which is also another piece of poetic writing when Cassian's like, "Who are you?"
Yeah. Which is a mirror from a line from Rogue One with Krennic as well.
Yeah, I mean, this idea about, like, I have built these things up, and then it's like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah. I mean, it is the beauty of the rebel insurgency, right? The Empire has all these faces and all these, like, totems of power and strength. It is the strongman thing that, like, fascism can only exist behind the might of these, like, larger-than-life characters. Whereas the insurgency, the rebellion, they're faceless. They can be anyone. And the fascists use that to their advantage sometimes by saying, like, well, who knows what dangers lurk in the hearts of men, but only we can protect you from who knows what behind every corner.
Are you saying they consider themselves the Shadow?
I'm saying there is a certain amount of fantasy power trip that comes with the vigilante, like, idea, right, of taking matters into your own hands, and that taken to a logical extreme can lead you to, like, fascist dictatorship-like ideas of a single person is the only one capable of handling a problem.
Of course. I mean, and we see that. That is one of the things I think that really, really works about the prequels, is the way you watch Palpatine manipulate the Senate into giving him emergency powers and then eventually just going full Emperor here.
Right. This is all Jar Jar's fault. We know this.
It's all fucking Jar Jar's fault, man. Man, he ruined the whole franchise, literally. But I also love, one of the things I love in this is that even that transition isn't instant. There's still an idea of the Senate, but they're useless, right? Like, you know, that stuff is great. All this is doing, once again, all this Disney stuff is going like, okay, it's because it wouldn't be like that, like you're talking about. It wouldn't just be flip a switch, you're under Imperial rule. Mm-hmm. It would still have to be seized over a long
Batch, I think, does a really good job of showing that, like, swift transition into the Empire trying to secure its power.
Bad Batch, Rebels, this show, all of this stuff that's taking place in that 20 years-ish interim from Revenge of the Sith to New Hope, really, it's doing such a great job of, really, these are some of the best prequels because they really are. I can feel how it just makes the world more real. All it's doing is elevating what came before it, which is what a good prequel should be doing, right? Yeah. Is this idea about, like, everything feels more grounded, everything feels more real. It's additive to. I haven't seen much that's taken away.
Well, it's what makes the Mandalorian era of stuff more interesting to me, because it doesn't feel like a prequel to what we know is coming. It feels like a sequel to what we know has happened.
But I'm sorry, I still don't think they're going to pull the trigger on erasing the sequel trilogy like some people I know are like,
I don't think they
I'm
will.
dying for it, man. When they finally just go, those don't count. I don't see that happening.
But it feels more like they're skirting it in ways.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when we get to Starfighter, right? Is that the title of the...
Starfighter and the new Jedi Order Rey movie, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah, I believe that'll happen someday. But anyway, Starfighter we know is happening.
John, we've seen a title card. Like, we say the same thing for Rogue Squadron.
They've cast, though. I mean, they have a release date. We have a
release date for Blade. I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, no, Blade's never happening. But
I know, that's what I'm saying, though. It's like, you can give me a title card and a cast and a release date, and that still doesn't mean the movie is happening.
Starfighter seems more on let me say, it seems more on solid ground. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with a movie that's just going to leap over. If you're doing the stories before, like with Mandalorian and stuff like that, and then now Sean Levy's going to make an unconnected thing, or at least a very loosely connected thing, that's just going to jump ahead a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I do feel like they are being forced to reckon with the, at least broad strokes, and to different degrees for each person, but I would say a broad strokes disappointment in the sequel trilogy.
They did the same thing with the prequels.
They did, except there's just more to latch onto. I mean, maybe we'll talk in 10 years and I'll be going like, actually, they really made those work, but I think it's tougher.
I think they're grappling with a lot of the same problems of just like a broad base of people walking away from those movies going like, not great. And again, we're going to see 10 years worth of stuff that's like padding around it. They're going to be telling cool stories in and around those eras. I can't, like, I think it's the exact same thing. I really do.
I think the thing that makes it more difficult is that it directly affects the most beloved characters of Star Wars.
Yeah,
I think that's the
fair.
biggest thing. You're like, that's the end of Han Solo. That's the end of Luke Skywalker.
Fair enough.
I think that's the bigger thing is as opposed to, oh, that's how Darth Vader started. Well, Darth Vader's still awesome. In this case, you're like, that's how our characters ended.
Yeah, I mean that's
easier to ignore.
Fair counterpoint.
That's why I think it's a slightly bigger challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible. I do think things in Mandalorian have seeded the First Order a little better, but I still don't like what the First Order is, and I still think it's horribly ill-defined and basically just, how do we get the Empire back?
Yeah, no, that's all it was.
Yeah, and I don't want the Empire back. That's why Thrawn to me is a very interesting bad guy, because he's not expressly the Empire. He's born of the Empire, but of course the thing I love about Thrawn is he's like, I can do it better.
I mean, he does say "Long live the Empire," but
he does. It's his idea of the Empire, right?
Sure.
And I think that's the thing about it that I like. It's the same thing I like about Mads Mikkelsen's character in the last Indiana Jones, where it's like, oh, I'm not going back to save Hitler. I'm going back to do it better than Hitler. That guy
what a sentence.
I thought that was such a great reveal where they think he's going back to save. He's like, no, I'm going back to supplant him because I know how to do it right this time. Love that. Shout out to the great Mads Mikkelsen, who's not in this, but is in Rogue One, and he's one of the things I really like in it. Because I
did like I've heard some complaints that the end of season 2 of Andor feels a little like rote and truncated. Like, well, okay, we have to get to Rogue One, so the finale of Andor feels a little bit like choppy and like this ends here because the next thing is Rogue One.
I mean, that was inevitable to some extent. Yeah. I think the idea, to me, the interesting thing about it is, of course, it is leading into Rogue One, but I do think, and one thing I do want to leave it on, of course, is the last image of the show, which is, of course, Cassian's child, which is not. But the idea that it's like it goes on is what I saw at the end of it. Even if it's not directly into Rogue One, this continues. These flames will not be snuffed out. Who that kid is, I don't give a fuck. The whole idea of theories of that's little Poe Dameron, which makes no sense. But
no,
there's
a whole comic about his parents finding a Force tree.
Yeah, which is super. I did see people are mad that this show retcons the Cassian and K2SO comic, and I'm just like, oh well, I think we can live with that. How could Gilroy do this? Somebody says, do you think Gilroy is very aware of that?
Gilroy retconned a 4-issue limited series that came out after the movie.
Gorgoni, even less. It was a one-shot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, which is just like an adventure, but it has a different way that they meet. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap things up here. There's a lot more to say about, but I will just say the thing I like about Gilroy, about the baby, when people are going, "Who is that baby?" He goes, "We never identified him," and that's where I want to leave it. It doesn't matter.
In a few years, there's going to be another character in a new movie or show with the last name Andor, and we're all going to go, "Oh,
of course." But he's like, I'm not seeding anything. That's just thematic ending of Cassian lives on through every parent who's right, and it's a beautiful last moment of Bix in the wheat field with the child and a new hope on a smaller scale level, right?
I call it the reverse Gladiator.
Very much so. Now, in that case, of course, we did get a whole sequel about...
Yeah. I hope we don't get a Gladiator 2 out of this.
I liked Gladiator.
I know you liked it, and I thought it was fine.
There were sharks in the arena, sir. It was rad as hell. All right. Real quick, though, we should mention that people can check out our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/punchupent. Get cool exclusive bonus content over there, as well as help support all the shows on the network. Where else can people check us out, Gorgani?
YouTube. you could be watching this on YouTube right now, for all I know, but it's at youtube.com/@punchupentertainment. While you're there, you can entertain yourself with all of the stuff we do at Punch Up Entertainment, like May the Panel Be With You, Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, the IP Squad, and while you're here, you can experience YouTube-exclusive ways of taking such entertainment, like reading those comics along with us on May the Panel Be With You, or joining Elliot Lewis and I as we trek through the Mass Effect franchise. By the time you're listening to this, I think we're real close to being done with Mass Effect 1, and then we'll get to that dark middle chapter where we can kick guys out of windows and be a real rogue scoundrel in the galaxy.
I will say, and it's probably not proper, anytime there was an option to do either thing, suddenly I did it.
Yeah, and here's the thing. A little bit of how the sausage is made. Elliot's watching me stream the game, so there's a certain amount of lag between what I'm doing in the game and what Elliot's reacting
to. Those hair trigger moments are going to
might be tricky. We'll see what happens.
I'm very curious to see how you guys handle that. But yes, all of that, head over on our YouTube page. But that's going to do it. We will probably see you next month. We don't quite know what we're going to be talking about.
We make no promises anymore, remember.
No, we're definitely coming back in July because there's a movie with Superman coming out. I don't know what he's doing in it. He seems to be flying around.
Saving people?
Seems like that's what he's up to, but we'll have to see. But that's going to do it. Until next month, I'm John Campbell.
And I will always be Mike Ergoni.
We're going to panel down.
Clearly someone's at your door and we have to go right now.
Yeah, Michael is.